The vast plains of Kenya, once free and untamed, had long been home to the Kikuyu, Maasai, and other native tribes. For centuries, they lived in harmony with the land, cultivating crops, raising cattle, and honoring their ancestral spirits. But in the late 19th century, everything changed. The British arrived, not as guests, but as rulers. With their rifles and iron laws, they carved Kenya into a colony, claiming fertile lands for European settlers. The native people, stripped of their ancestral lands, were reduced to laborers in their own country. The once proud Kikuyu, whose warriors had fought fiercely for their independence, were now confined to native reserves, barren lands with little to offer. Meanwhile, British settlers thrived, growing coffee, tea, and sisal on thousands of acres stolen from the Africans. The law favored the whites, and the black population was treated as second-class citizens, without political rights or freedom. A deep resentment simmered beneath the surface. It was not just about land, it was about dignity, culture, and the right to govern their own future. By the 1940s, African nationalists began organizing resistance movements. The Kenya African Union, KU, led by Jomo Kenyatta, sought peaceful negotiations with the British, demanding political reforms and land redistribution. But the colonial rulers dismissed their demands, branding them as radical troublemakers. As frustration grew, a new, more militant movement emerged, the Mau Mau. Unlike KU, the Mau Mau did not believe in peaceful negotiations. They knew that only blood and fire could free Kenya. Deep in the forests of Mount Kenya and the Aberdare Range, thousands of Kikuyu warriors, men and women alike, swore a sacred oath, a binding ritual where they pledged their lives to the fight for freedom. This oath became the foundation of the rebellion, uniting people under one cause. We shall fight. We shall kill. We shall reclaim what is ours, or die trying. The Mau Mau fighters began organizing in secret, stockpiling weapons, gathering intelligence, and recruiting supporters. By 1952, war had begun. The Mau Mau launched a series of attacks against white settlers, loyalist Kikuyu chiefs, and colonial outposts. Armed with homemade guns, machetes, and sheer determination, they ambushed British convoys, burned European-owned farms, and assassinated government collaborators. Fear spread like wildfire. British settlers, who once lived comfortably on stolen land, now barricaded themselves inside their homes, sleeping with rifles under their pillows. The colonial government, in a desperate attempt to maintain control, declared a state of emergency in 1952. Under the command of Governor Evelyn Baring, the British responded with brutal force. Thousands of soldiers and African police officers were deployed. The government arrested, tortured, and executed anyone suspected of having ties to the Mau Mau. Villages were burned. Families were separated. But the Mau Mau did not surrender. From their jungle hideouts, they waged a relentless guerrilla war, striking fear into their enemies. Unable to defeat the Mau Mau in open battle, the British adopted a new, horrifying strategy: mass imprisonment. Over 1.5 million Kikuyu men, women, and children were rounded up and placed in concentration camps. Officially called rehabilitation centers, these camps were filled with unspeakable horrors. Prisoners were tortured, starved, and beaten. Women were raped, men were castrated, and entire families vanished overnight. One of the most infamous camps was Ola Camp, where prisoners were forced into hard labor and brutal interrogations. In 1959, the world was horrified when news broke that 11 prisoners were beaten to death by guards. The British tried to cover it up, but the truth was out. The so-called civilized empire had resorted to barbarism. Despite the suffering, the Mau Mau spirit remained unbroken. One of the most legendary Mau Mau leaders was Dedan Kimathi, a fearless warrior who led his men from the depths of the forests. Dressed in animal skins and armed with nothing but courage, he became the face of the rebellion, a symbol of defiance against the British Empire. In 1956, after years of relentless fighting, Kimathi was finally captured. The British wasted no time in sentencing him to death. On February 18, 1957, He was hanged at Kamatai Maximum Security Prison. His last words were not of fear, but of defiance. "I do not fear death, for I die for my people." The British believed that killing Kimathi would end the uprising. They were wrong. By the late 1950s, the British knew they were losing control. The Mau Mau may have been weakened, but their struggle had ignited a movement that could not be stopped. International pressure mounted. The world was watching, and Britain could no longer justify its brutal occupation of Kenya. The winds of change were sweeping across Africa, with one colony after another demanding self-rule. Finally, in 1963, Kenya won its independence. Jomo Kenyatta, once imprisoned for alleged Mau Mau ties, became the first president of a free Kenya. The British packed their bags and left. The empire that once ruled half the world had been defeated by the warriors of the forest. For decades after independence, the Mau Mau were ignored by the Kenyan government, their sacrifices overshadowed by political struggles. But history could not forget them. In 2003, the Mau Mau were officially recognized as freedom fighters. In 2013, after a long legal battle, the British government issued an apology and paid reparations to surviving Mau Mau veterans. But no amount of money could erase the suffering they endured. Today, the spirit of the Mau Mau lives on. Their struggle is a reminder that freedom is never given, it is fought for. Their story, once buried in the shadows, is now told with pride, a testament to Kenya's resilience and courage. As the sun sets over the forests where they once hid, their voices still echo in the wind. We fought, we bled, we died, but we won.